Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is Jonathan Beck to talk about personalization at scale and using technology for fundraising. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Alex. Great to be here. Appreciate it. Love the podcast.
Kind words, thank you. So, for people who are hearing you for the first time, I was wondering if you could share your superhero origin story. That is to say, how did you get started working with nonprofits?
Yeah, sure. It's a bit of a long one, but it's starts in the Silicon Valley. I always had a heart for nonprofits. I went to a college that was a faith-based college, and that was kind of one of their values was freely you've received, so freely give. And there are a lot of nonprofit classes and minors that are offered there. So there's always a general interest there. My father was a man of the cloth, if you will. He was a preacher, and isn't anymore. Ended up leaving that quote unquote ministry, but kind of grew up in that environment. Grew up around family friends that were doing those things. But to me, it always seemed like there was a big gap in meaning for your modern man, I guess, right? A lot of us are stuck in sort of on this conveyor belt orbiting a normal life. And it feels like there's other people out there doing really, really meaningful things. And by donating, you could just purchase a piece of that for yourself. And that always seemed really scalable, I guess, and really great. That if everyone was giving a percentage of their money away to people who were basically professionally out in the world trying to bring justice and mercy in ways that were needed, then certainly it would be not only a much better place for the problems, but it'd also be a much better place just from the meaning and purpose everyone was receiving. So that was always just an interest. I always thought nonprofits, and it just that was a very cool, not necessarily a full solution to fixing the world by any means, but definitely a solution to help giving people more meaning in being a part of those organizations. So there's that. From the business side, I was very fortunate, but basically bounced back to back between financial technology companies that had some tremendous success. The first robo-advisor, a marketplace for trading securitized debt portfolios. And both of my friends started those companies basically. And the success was very quick. So it really looked like I knew what I was doing when I really did not. And because of that, that fake, we'll call it that facade of success, I was invited to be one of the founding members of a payments company called Paystan, which was top 5 fastest growing company in the Silicon Valley, 3 years in a running. I think they just got their 4th year last year. They're a multi-billion-dollar valuated company at this point. I built the sales and marketing team there, whereas before I had done more product and analytics stuff. So after that, I did some growth consulting in the Valley. And when I say the Valley, I mean the Silicon Valley. And the growth consulting allowed me to kind of get a reset. And I had always thought, well, I would love to do something in the nonprofit space. I know financial technology pretty well at this point. So went and tried to make an application. It was called GiveList. And it was one of the many gravestones in the consumer financial technology space, specifically focusing on nonprofits. Even Google has a gravestone in that yard. So there was a big effort there of trying to basically make an application for people to be able to discover nonprofits that are doing work that was interesting to them, fund them, and then get some kind of communication back. And so the app was a complete and horrific flop. Didn't work whatsoever, but I ended up pivoting it because I found some of the technology we had built was very useful. And it's kind of your classic pivot story. We're now called WeGive, and we make the software does a lot of the same stuff it did, but we're just giving it to nonprofits to use for their specific donors instead of trying to push a mobile app to people, which apparently I'm not great at. So that's the full story.
You said something at the beginning that I really appreciated. You said freely receive and freely give. That's the first time I ever heard that expression. Could you share more about what that means to you?
Yeah, freely receive and freely give. Freely you've received, so freely give. I is a Bible verse, but it's essentially, my view is that I've never earned anything. I'm not sure I believe humans earn things. And when I get into these social situations where I hear people giving advice and saying, well, you deserve that, it seems like such an unloving thing to say to someone, to try to push sort of a perspective of there's a type of world we live in where we're all humans, and some humans deserve certain experiences and pleasures and sensualities. And it's not true. No one deserves anything. And everything that we have that's a positive can basically 100% be attributed to someone who came before you, right? The fact that I can read, for example, or that there's even a language that we're speaking right now, that there's internet, that there's electricity, and all of the things that just get pushed into like this equation of status quo assumptions are all absolutely remarkably incredible achievements and building blocks on which we're able to even walk around on. And so that's kind of in general my view. And I would like to have a perspective of everything that I have is ultimately a gift and an opportunity to steward those things well. And I want to have a lot of gratitude for those things and the things that I have been given, and then ideally give and be generous with my time and energy and resources as a way of being thankful for the things that I've been given, which I think most everyone's given everything is my general worldview. So
I love it. I've never heard it quite phrased that way, but I totally agree about the status quo, how we've been given so much and that we just take for granted, and that not a lot of people are actually have that introspection to admit that. This is a different conversation we could definitely have, and I would be keen to have it, but maybe not today because that's a little more philosophical. But I love the principle behind it and the idea that because we have been given this and the appreciation that we should have for it, it should motivate us ideally to be able to return that and add to it as we go along through life. So that to me is the most important takeaway from that portion. Let's move forward though to WeGive, because that's the current organization you have now. Was there a specific reason why you created it? Like, was there a demand in the market? Because you said it's just to make sure it's clear too. It's donations or donation management platform for nonprofits. Maybe you can describe, for example, what WeGive is in summary, and then what was the motivation behind it, or a need that you saw that you were hoping to fill.
Thanks for refocusing us. We're going down a path of philosophy there. And excuse me, I've got a little bit of a cold, so my voice is kind of scratchy. But the company WeGive specifically was created out of necessity, whereas Giveless was more, I wanted to do something in the space, and Giveless pivoted into WeGive. And in technology, we have a word that we reference a lot called pivoted, which means when a startup, and almost all startups do this, but a startup starts and they realize that there's something interesting, but it's not exactly where they're pointing. And so they shift their focus a little bit, and that's called product market fit. So kind of the whole goal for an early stage pre-seed, seed funded startup in technology, at least, is to find that product market fit. And that product market fit means there's people that are willing to pay for your product. there's a fit there, and there's an actual sizable and interesting addressable market. And so I definitely pivoted WeGive out of those realizations. As far as what it is and kind of how to describe it, that I've actually found somewhat challenging, because I end up bucketing our product. A lot of people understand products based on their understanding of other products, right? And so it's a lot easier. It's cheaper, and it's not a great habit to describe your company in these ways, to be like, oh, we're the Uber of China. It's like, okay, well, I immediately understand what you do if I understand Uber and I understand where China is, which I probably do. But in the nonprofit space, I've had almost more of a difficulty making those parallels. And I think I have some opinions why that is. But essentially, what I would say we do is, I would almost, like, if I had to do one of those comparisons, I would almost say we're the Shopify of the nonprofit world. But it's like, that sounds so silly. Ultimately, we compete in kind of we displace three different product categories specifically. And sometimes we are adding a brand new product category for these nonprofits. And so that's usually what I call revenue acceptance, right? So giving commerce or commerce enablement. So if you're going to accept a donation or a pledge, sell a ticket, sell items, sell memberships, whatever you're doing, you're going to do some kind of transaction. Your transaction as a nonprofit is going to fall into one of basically 8 or 9 buckets, right? And within those, there's defined UI flows, right? There's not like an infinite number of ways you can ultimately set up a recurring donation or accept a pledge or create a pledge plan or do an auction. There's just kind of some defined UI flows for that, user interfaces. And so that's, for example, giving commerce. Then there's communications, and communications are omni-channel. So we give the orgs text messages, emails, handwritten notes, printed mail, platform messaging. And that's kind of usually the new one. But if you want to come onto the site and chat with the nonprofit, or log in and chat with other donors in one specific channel about something, kind of like a Slack, if you will, we power those experiences as well. So communications, giving acceptance, and then portal. And portal that's a tough one, because a lot of other platforms say they have portal and they don't have portal. They have a place for you to log in on that software's website to go see like your donations at that software without naming names. That's not a portal. When I say portal would be like a digital experience platform portal, where I log in as a donor and I'm seeing all of my data that you have on me as a nonprofit turned and translated into some kind of beautiful experience that orbits my impact. It's much more communication based. It's much more purpose and meaning based. High personalization, which is the main thing that's really different about our platform across all of those, what I would say those 3 pillars would be it's extreme personalization at scale, which has typically not been possible, largely because the data has been too disparate, right? If you're in industry-based CRM, of which there are many, that data doesn't just automatically exist in a channel that you can run transactional text messages or email, depending on gift size or campaign, and then run some kind of logic if they were on the website in the last 30 days, or if they have a gift that they abandoned on the website, or if they were filling out a form, etc. So getting all of those, what you would call JavaScript or web events, into an interface that's tied and married with all of your data on people, and making that usable for the words that you're saying, when you're saying things, who you're saying them to, that's really basically impossible without a bunch of software developers working at the nonprofit, which none of these nonprofits have. And even the ones that do aren't doing that. So we make that possible out of the box. And that was a huge need that I saw. Is the answer was, man, all these nonprofits are basically trying to communicate to people on why a donation matters, get a donation, then communicate how it made a difference to keep getting donations. And it's all communication and digital commerce, basically. And so the product that's being delivered is just not in UPS. It's hey, you made a real difference, Alex. Thank you so much. Here's a video. If you get them an incredible experience as a donor, feeling like you made a huge difference, then you're going to give again, period. And if you get a horrible experience, not getting communicated with about the difference you made, then you're not going to get that meaning or identity product that you went to try to purchase when you donated, and you're never going to give again. And that's what we see across the board predominantly. When I looked at the data, I couldn't believe the retention numbers that I was seeing in the nonprofit space. That was the biggest surprise to me, coming from like the corporate world, where like churn rates are 3% or 5% instead of 80. Yeah, I couldn't believe the retention. And so that's been kind of the main focus, is helping these nonprofits fix retention with personalization. And that was the need I saw, and that sort of boiled down into those 3 pillars to a degree. That might have been more than you bargained for there, though, with that question.
That's quite all right. No worries. But I see a connection, because you said earlier that people like donating because they buy a piece of meaning, that this is like an easy way to be able to give without, like it's instead of doing the work themselves, spending a few minutes and a few clicks to give an amount to an organization that has an impact, gives them that sense of meaning. So when you mention the fact that in order for them to feel that meaning, they need to know the difference that they made, I see a connection there. So if I would draw a parallel or a connection between the two of them, if you don't give them that experience, if you don't show them they are making a difference and how they're making a difference, then they lack that meaning, which defeats the initial purpose why they gave in the beginning, and therefore they won't donate again. Would you say that's really one of the key elements of being able to give people that sense of meaning?
I think it is. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's communication. I mean, there is a transaction that provides that meaning, and that's just simply that it occurred. But that's not like a good giving experience, right? If I go and I drop money into a suitcase for a homeless person on the street, I'm not expecting some impact update from that homeless guy, right?
Right.
And I'm feeling, scientifically proven, I'm feeling good because I feel like I made the world a better place, and I did something purposeful and meaningful that aligns with values, that wasn't selfish. And that makes me feel good. And it actually, scientifically speaking, is the most important vector of happiness, meaning and purpose, largely based on identity, right? And so if I do something, generally I build my identity based on the things that I do as a human. And so if I always am dropping money every hour of every day in homeless people's suitcases or cups that are sitting on the side of the street, and that's all that I do with my life, then my identity is going to be I donate to homeless people. And I know I'm not getting impact updates from them. So there is an achievement of identity for myself. But when I'm giving to an organization that's not the person receiving the money, but an organization that's turning my money into either a grant to someone else that's receiving the money, or turning my money into some kind of program that provides a service, then yeah, I do want an update. Oh yeah, because there's a massive, massive, massive gap between and it still happens actually with the homeless person. Are they gonna help themselves, or are they gonna spend that money on destructive behavior? I really hope. I would bet you actually that's the biggest reason people don't donate or give money to homeless people in general. Having volunteered in a number of places, being from the Bay Area where homelessness is absolutely rampant, I can tell you anecdotal data and qualitative data. I don't have specific quantitative data, but I would be very surprised if the number one reason people didn't give to homeless people wasn't that they didn't think, they were just thought the money was going to be wasted on more destructive behavior. In my experience, that's what it is. And so in a sense, that's, hey, I've given to them before, or I know people that have given, and the impact and meanings, now there's no real cycle there. So it is actually still almost does apply. Now, if you go and give to a nonprofit and you find out that that nonprofit, once you give, you get no thank you, you get no communication, and you just get sent back to the homepage of the website, which remarkably is the experience for around 95% of nonprofits. They just take donations and then you're back on the homepage and you're added to a general marketing list that these people don't even want to be on anyways, right? If you're a nonprofit and you do that, and then I find out that you just paid your staff 100% of the money, did zero amount of work on programs, then I am going to feel like I was robbed. I purchased a meaning. Maybe you help inner city kids with after school programs. I wanted inner city kids to have after school programs, and that's what I purchased, of that feeling. And instead, I paid for your team of 5 to all buy a car for themselves. And you didn't do anything to help inner city kids. You just were working at a company that had a tax filing that helps inner city kids. And so that's going to be upsetting. And so those are like ridiculous. That's a ridiculous juxtaposition. But yeah, I think communication around what the money's doing, and it doesn't have to be synchronous communication. Okay. And that's what I think is really important to understand. It doesn't have to, it can be asynchronous. When I say asynchronous, like branding, for example, is asynchronous communication, right? A company's branding communicates things to you. No one's speaking to you directly, right? And it's not just, I've heard it phrased as one-to-one communications versus one-to-many. I think one-to-many is actually okay. I don't want a phone call from the organization I donated $50 to, right? But the type of communication I want to be not treating me like an ATM, but telling me about the meaning and purpose I'm achieving. So yeah, I really do think I think that we've proven that with like social media and these other types of sites, that you can give people station and identity in the digital world. And you can create a feeling and brand there that communicates asynchronously whenever anyone visits it, digitally at scale, the things that you want it to communicate. And I think that's available to nonprofits for their donor base specifically. And I think it really does increase retention dramatically. So yeah. Do you see the same thing, or would you disagree?
I do, and I wanted to get into that, but just because I don't want to forget the thought I had, I would warrant that when we donate to a homeless person, we do get a feedback loop. It's right in that moment. It's the smile, it's the thank you, it's the little gesture. So yes, you don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now, but in that moment, you do get some kind of,
you do,
hopefully at least, gesture of goodwill, of gratitude on their part, which can feed your sense of meaning and purpose and the reason why you do it. You don't have to necessarily get it, but there is that opportunity there. So it's not like it's just I give and walk away and never get anything in return. There is a certain part, hopefully, that they do return to you in that moment.
I agree with you. Not as much in the Bay Area.
Perhaps. Yeah, I mean, if you're inundated,
you don't get a lot of thank yous regardless.
That's a different conversation.
Yeah. We're getting philosophical again.
In terms of meeting, I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, the idea of, I agree. I would also want to know where my money is going. And I think to the same point, I would not want to know that I'm paying for employee cars, because I would be kind of against the principle of why I'm donating to begin with. I was curious then, because you talked about personalization at scale and being able, I agree also with the one-to-many. I don't want phone calls either, because it's, I do want to be involved. I would like to get that update to know what's going on, but I also don't want to be not bothered, but like
interrupted.
Who makes phone calls these days? It's very intrusive at this point. So there's a balance there to say, thank you for your generosity. Here's what we've done with it, so that I can get that feedback loop, and I'm motivated to do it again. But I'm actually curious to know from the nonprofit perspective how they're able to use either technology or any other mechanism to achieve that kind of personalization at scale. Because yes, I can have, or as a nonprofit, I can get the donor's name, first name, email address, address, and so forth, and I can give them a generic message to say, of every dollar we get, this percentage goes here, this percentage goes there. But that to me doesn't seem like, maybe it is personalization, but I was hoping or wanting to believe that personalization go just one level deeper than that, to make it more, maybe to know like the reason why I'm motivated. Like what do nonprofits can do to make, I guess I'll phrase it as a question. Like besides saying, thank you, Alex, for your donation of $10 and here's where it's going, what level deeper can they get to, if any, to make it seem a little more personal than just a generic message?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a great question. I mean, I think, and there's going to be so many opinions about this, but I believe there's a couple of things that are very clear. One thing that's very clear is some people might refer to it as station or identity, but station or identity at the nonprofit, right? That's one. And that's basically treating someone like they belong and that they're a part of what you're doing, versus this person across this chasm that's sitting on this pile of cash that might be able to flick some dollars down, right? But treating someone like they are a part of the organization. That's one. And I think you can do that digitally by providing people a digital home with personalization. Okay. So that's profile, giving people a profile or a portal, and making that portal and profile communication based. But if I want to come and look at the impact I've made, or view my relationship with you, or view other opportunities, see what I've done with you, I'll tell you where I don't want to go. I don't want to go through 20,000 emails in my inbox. I don't want to go through the past 5 years of direct mail that are actually in the landfill and were never even opened, right? I don't want to go through my text messages. Give me a filtered down view of what I want to see, which is what a lot of these social platforms do, right? If someone pops on Instagram, they're going to view a filtered view of the photos they posted to Instagram on their profile. Give these donors a filtered view of their lifetime with you. That's identity, and just that identity alone and that station, that belonging, I think goes a long way. But it needs to be feel like it's at your organization. That's one. Two, raw content is king. Okay. There's been this whole piece of content is king. Content is king, but bad content does not do well. And in fact, these nonprofits, one, they're not capable of creating really high quality, high produced content. They're not capable of it. There's an agency that you can hire that's maybe capable of it, but you have no set up distribution channels. You have no real audience and consumption culture around that type of content. The type of content people are actually wanting more, and what actually performs better. And when I say better, I mean actually the numbers are better, is raw content, short form, raw, unedited, unproduced content, stuff that you would see when you load up to check in with what your friends, family, or favorite people in the world are up to, right? And that's the habit everyone's pulled themselves into. That's actually really achievable. You have people that are working every day at your organization, in the field or on your programs, looking at grant requests or whatever they're doing, and they have a device that's made to create that type of content. And everyone in the world is creating that type of content with that device. And they probably are in their personal lives. So you have a really, really great way to basically democratize content creation at a nonprofit. right? Now, some nonprofits do it really, really well. For example, religious organizations, right? Every Jewish temple, every Christian church, every mosque has someone that's going to be making a planned speech every single week. And now everyone's realizing, hey, we can record these and make these reconsumable. Most nonprofits in general aren't planning a planned speech for an hour with like 500 people attending. But they are doing really cool stuff in the field, and they do have an iPhone, 13 or whatever it is in their pocket. So just capturing, hey guys, thanks so much for supporting us on this program. Really excited. We just got a delivery of this stuff. We're moving it here. These people are doing this. Thank you. 30 seconds. Guess what? That's something that I want to see. That's something you probably want to see, Alex. That's something anyone wants to see that's donated to that organization. And it's so efficient. I think the efficiency, we have no appetite for a lack of efficiency when we understand the motivations now digitally. I don't want a phone call from you. I want that 15-second clip, right? And so get those clips. One, I think 3, have actual distribution channels for that communication. And you need a home for the communication, which comes back to portal, right? You can get that video and blast it out in a text or blast it out in an email. That email might get a 20% open and a 5% click through, or a 10% click through if it's really good. That text might have a 90% open and a 20% click through, but then it just dies. So have a home for that stuff, and that's where it comes back to that personalized profile, which you can use. You can use a lot of lightweight tools to do that with content. I would not say typical content distribution works great for nonprofits. Posting videos like that on Instagram, for example, is not helpful because people open up Instagram with different motivations, right? You don't open up Instagram to see what nonprofits you follow are up to in general. That's not why TikTok exists. That's not the content that's popular and successful on TikTok. That's not the content that's popular on Twitter, on Reddit, etc. So I think create your own home for the content to live. Create identity station. Those are very achievable. And then personalized, timely communications. That's happened in the corporate world with customer data platforms, CDPs, right? There's CRM sort of ruled in the corporate world. The Salesforce, Sugar, Zoho, Microsoft, etc., major CRMs. And then these CDPs came along and were like a Klaviyo or something. HubSpot actually started as a CDP, does CRM now very well. But these organizations came and were like, hey, actually there's all this data that you're interacting with, and you're interacting with it in these interfaces where you're supposed to just be a human, like going through this data and giving people phone calls and emails, but really you're like a marketing company because you have this really large group of people that you need to be communicating with at scale with personalization. And that's actually the biggest lever you can pull for your business. And it's not going through your CRM and finding the 10 people to make a phone call to today because of how potentially valuable they are. You should still do that. We should also have the other 100,000 that you're never going to even look at. You should have those guys getting run through really great experiences digitally with communication pieces as well. And so that's totally possible too. A lot of those corporate tools you could set up, but those are maybe a little bit expensive for nonprofits. But I think a great place to start is just, hey, if we were going to say something to this group of people, one, would we break these group of people down into different personas, or would they just be all one? People that have donated maybe, and people that haven't donated. And if we are going to communicate with them, and we're planning on communicating with them consistently around stuff they actually want to hear about. So kind of updates from us, not asking for more money, but hey, here's what we're doing and why it's cool. Short form, high efficient. not a time consuming for me to consume, right? I don't want to go through a massive packet. I don't have the time for that. But I'll watch a 30-second video. Absolutely. And so I think leaning into the types of content that perform, like raw video, for example, using distribution channels that exist, personalization at scale for those masses, and just use my first name and give me a piece of content I actually want to see, and then give me a home digitally at your organization. I think those are all generally somewhat low-hanging fruit that you can do with a pretty simple tech stack. There's a lot of other, all the corporate businesses that are for some reason 10 years ahead in technology adoption have done that, and they're small businesses, e-commerce businesses. Everyone does this stuff with pre-made tools. Doesn't have to be a big custom lift. And so I think those are probably what I would say.
I can tell you that if I had that kind of portal where I definitely felt part of the organization, that would give me, that's just thinking about it gives me a warm feeling, because it's now, it's a sense of belonging. It's a sense of I'm really making a difference. I'm seeing the difference. It's not just us and them anymore. So that's a great way. And I didn't think about that before, about personalizing it without knowing me specifically, but somehow making me feel part of the group. So thank you for that. I was wondering if you could just, for a quick definition, because you mentioned the word raw a couple of times, raw content, raw video.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by when you say raw? What does that mean? And how does that compare to non-raw?
Yeah. Unedited. If you're shooting something with a DSLR, with a full-blown camera and tripod, like that's fine. And there's a home for that, right? If you're going to have a big gala event and you're going to play a video, it's going to be a minute and a half that summarizes what you did that year or something like that. Or you want to get a really solid 15-second thank you clip from your CEO or the executive director. Hey guys, thank you so much for supporting Foundation ABC. We really appreciate you, and we couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much. Cut. Like that's produced. You're going to bring that into some kind of editing tool and chop it up and make it look good. That's unraw. That's produced content, right? And there's a home for it, and you should have some pieces there. But that's a big effort, man. Holy smokes. And the people that make that type of content and they do it well are very expensive. But what performs actually better, when I say performance, I mean engagement with that content and how it drives action and usage, and the desire of people to watch it is a camera is made on your iPhone and is unedited, doesn't go into an editing bay. It might get trimmed, the beginning and the beginning and the back of it, like you would on your actual phone. But cameras, portrait mode, faced inward, selfie view, talking, pointing at stuff, right? And just a talking head right there live. That's so, if you can communicate at all and you can speak the same language as your donors, then you can create that content. And if it's, sub 30 seconds, sub 1 minute, people will watch the whole thing, and people watch it multiple times. You look at, go to some of the top nonprofits in the world, go to their YouTube channel or their Vimeo channel, look at their most highly produced videos that they probably spent $40,000 creating. And there are like 400 views, right? I mean, I'm talking about organizations that have over $1 billion in donations, millions of contact records in their database, millions of donations a year. And they got a couple hundred views. They got the same amount of views on a highly produced, very expensive video. It's like, okay, well, that video must have been a helpful piece of content in moving people's hearts towards your organization at the gala, right? Before whoever his name is or whoever her name is came up and spoke in between sessions or whatever as a planned little 5-minute break. That was probably helpful before you called everyone to donate. But for the 2 or 3 million people in your CRM that are never going to see that video, that actually have way more donation potential than the 500 people that came to the event, yeah, it was a complete waste. from a marketing ROI standpoint. You could have just flipped a camera around in the field when all of those kids were jumping up and down, crying for joy, celebrating the fact that they had clean water at a fountain, didn't have to walk 2 miles anymore. You could probably just flip the camera around and been like, we're here. We just got the pump working. Everyone is so stoked. We appreciate you guys. That would have hit way harder for the 2 million people in your database, right? Mm-hmm. And they would have watched it, and you would have had probably more than 2 million views. But instead, you just got some highly produced videos sitting in people's inboxes with a sub 1% click-through rate, and it's got 500 views. Helpful at the gala, though. So that's the difference between, raw and unraw, cut and, produced content versus just give me the realistic thing from the field. I don't want it spruced up. I want the efficient, tight, quick, short form message that I'm getting from everyone else all day long in the world, right? So it's kind of a get with the program type of content, if you will.
There definitely seems to be a trend these days about genuine content, stuff that is less edited. Mm-hmm. Even podcasts like this, I keep the ums and the ers and the background noise because it's a certain sense of genuine authenticity, which I think is important.
That's too bad for me.
And people are looking forward to it. But it's true. You're right. And I think each has its place. And, if that edited video moves the hearts and minds of people who are at a gala, fantastic. But let's just keep in mind that when you're trying to reach a larger audience, they really do prefer, I believe, a more genuine experience. Look, I'm looking at the time. Yeah. It's flown by. I have like a dozen questions I still wanted to ask. I'm not sure we'll have time for them. So
that's my bad.
No worries. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you? Because I'm sure they would have additional questions. I hope they have additional questions. So how can people get in touch with you online?
Yeah, messaging me on LinkedIn usually works surprisingly well. It's Jonathan Beck. And of course, email. So jonathan@wegive.com works great. Probably those 2 ways.
Awesome. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, you got it. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.